welcome. You're listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lorilee Binstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network and anywhere you get your podcasts. Today, we're diving deep into the journey of someone whose work has saved lives around the world, but whose inner healing may be her most profound accomplishment yet. My guest is Jane Chen, a social entrepreneur, inventor, and humanitarian known for co-founding Embrace Global, the organization behind a low-cost infant incubator that has helped save over 1 million premature babies. She's been honored by presidents, praised by global leaders, and celebrated by the World Economic Forum. But behind the success was a woman quietly unraveling, striving to meet impossible expectations, struggling with burnout, and grappling with the scars of childhood trauma. In her new book, Like a Wave We Break, a memoir of falling apart and finding myself, Jane takes us on a vulnerable and powerful journey of unlearning, self-discovery, and healing. Jane, welcome to this show. I am so honored to have you on.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, many people know you as this compassionate innovator behind Embrace Global, the woman who saved millions of lives, but few people know the inner world that you were struggling with behind this public image. What inspired you to write this book, Like a Wave We Break?
Yeah, so I spent 10 years building my company. We build low-cost portable incubators for premature babies in developing countries. And my team and I out of Stanford developed a technology that is not only low cost, but works without constant electricity. So it can be used in very remote parts of the world. And so we took that idea, we turned it into a company. I moved to India for the next 4 years, which is home to 40% of all the world's premature babies.
Oh.
And over those 4 years and for the whole really 10 years of this period, I just worked nonstop. I didn't take weekends off. I was just working around the clock. I believe so much in the mission, but I was also working in really unhealthy ways. What happened was 10 years in, the company shut down. We had just faced so many setbacks and challenges along the way, from manufacturing to distribution to funding challenges, and we had to shut our doors. And that moment just led me to a complete mental breakdown, because my work had been my entire identity and my entire life. And truth be told, for those 10 years, I didn't really know what was driving me. And so I felt so broken. I decided to leave everything behind and go on a healing journey. I packed up a surfboard, a suitcase. I bought a one-way ticket to Indonesia. I basically, drained my bank account and went on a healing journey for the next year. But it was really a matter of survival for me at that point. And so I traveled the world experimenting with all these different healing modalities, and we can get into that later. But really what I was forced to confront was the trauma of my upbringing. I grew up with a lot of physical violence in my home. My father was physically violent with me and my sisters, and I hadn't connected the dots until going on this journey that it was feeling so powerless through my childhood. That's what had driven me to want to help the most powerless people. That's what had given me the fuel and the fire, but it also consumed me, right? Because no matter what I did, no matter how many babies I saved or how many accolades I got, I just never felt like I was enough. And it was through all of this that I started to kind of understand that sometimes achievement can be a trauma response, right? Like we feel the need, because we have this sense of not enoughness. We feel the need to go out there and prove our worth and do more and be more, to the point where we are completely exhausted. And I started to see how unhealthy those behaviors were and where they came from. And that's what really set me off on this deep journey. And so, coming out of that, I thought, I really want to share this. And I want to share this for anyone who has been through similar struggles.
Well, that's something so many of us can relate to, right? That constant drive to prove we're enough. I mean, I'm looking right now, like I have this frame on my wall that says, I am enough, I have enough, I do enough. My therapist told me to put it up and frame it. And because I need to continuously tell myself that. I was sexually abused by my father. So it was, and I had no idea that affected any part of my life until I was in my 30s. And so I just remember just it's it's hard. I'm amazed that you were able to, root that back, that enoughness and all of that back to your childhood trauma. And so then you set out on this journey to heal that trauma. And I love that you try different modalities. And I've read about some of the modalities, and I'm totally on board with all of them. And so I want to know everything. I don't know if you have all the time, but could you talk about some of the ones that really, really stood out for you and
Yeah,
transformed you?
absolutely. Yeah. I did everything from, somatic work, breath work, energy work. I did frog poisoning, psychedelics, went to every self-help seminar, meditated in the jungle for 10 days in silence, all the things. And
Wow.
I would say a couple of things that were turning points for me. So one was actually reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel.
Mm. Yes, that was a big one for me.
Yeah. And I remember reading that book, and it's an academic book, and I wept. I cried so much because I finally had language to talk about what I had been through, and I had compassion. And what I learned, I would say the biggest thing I learned is that trauma is not just something that happened in the past, right? That stays in the past. It actually rewires your brain and your nervous system. And so it's the way you bring the past into the present, right? And trauma is also stored in our bodies. It's stored in our limbic brain, right, which is responsible for our feelings and our body. It's not stored at the level of the neocortex, which is our thinking brain. So
Hmm.
just talking about trauma is not going to help you process it. You have to get back into your body and learn how to feel safe in your body.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that
Wow.
really changed my approach to trauma. And it's why, mindfulness is really important, because having awareness is the first step. And for many of us trauma survivors, we learn to disconnect from our bodies. So a big part of my process was learning to sit with myself and stillness and feel my feelings and pause long enough that I could do that,
Yeah.
right? Instead of doing, that we pause and we sit with our heartbreak, we sit with our grief, we sit with our fear, and we get really comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Yes.
right? So I would say that is kind of the first and the foremost. One of the things I often, and sorry, just to kind of round out this thing, after I read The Body Keeps the Score, I became so obsessed with Bessel van der Kolk, who's the author, that I stalked him until he agreed to become my therapist.
Stop. No way. Are you serious? That's incredible.
Yeah,
Oh
so I went
gosh,
to his
tell me more.
retreats. Yeah, and it's just like, this is the overachiever's way of healing, by the way. Like I had to try everything and do everything, and I had a spreadsheet and all the things. But I kept going back to Bessel and asking. He was like, "No, I'm not taking any clients." He's also 83, but he finally agreed to take me on, and that work was also so important for me. And I think the work of therapy, and why I think, healing happens in community. It happens with other people. And why I think chat GPT or an AI bot can't replace therapy is because so much happens through what's called empathetic resonance. So it is someone just giving you facial expression, pausing you. Like with Bessel, I would say something that happened, tell him about something that happened, and I want to kind of rush through it. And he would just pause and take a deep breath, right? And he'd be like, and then I would have to pause and take a deep breath. And then I would start to understand, oh, that was sad,
Hmm.
and then I was given a safe space to access those feelings because of the safety that he provided and what he was mirroring in terms of the emotions that I hadn't been allowed to feel as a child.
Right.
So I think having someone there who could create that safe space for you is really important. But beyond that, one of the practices I often talk about is internal family systems.
Yep. That's what I
Something
we
you're
work with.
familiar with? Yes.
Yes, yes.
And I could talk a little bit about it, or your audience.
Yes, your experience. I feel like everyone's experience is different and profound, and so yeah, I would love to hear more about how your experience with IFS worked for you.
Yeah, so IFS is based on this premise that all of us have a multitude of parts, right? Internal parts. So you may have an overachiever part. You might have the control freak or the perfectionist. I'm making this up, but we have these parts, and they come out to protect us from feelings that we don't necessarily want to face. So we also
Hmm.
might have a part that feels rejected or abandoned or just really scared, right? And so I had this part, this little girl in me who just didn't feel worthy. And so I had all these protectors come out to protect that little girl, right? The overachiever, the one who was going to do at any cost, the part of me that worked to exhaustion to protect that little girl who didn't feel like she wasn't enough. She felt like she wasn't enough. And so what this practice teaches you is that instead of banishing these parts or shaming them, you develop compassion for them and you learn to relate to them differently,
Yeah.
right? From the stance of yourself, self with a capital S, you relate to these parts. And it's been this beautiful practice of acknowledging these different parts and then developing like a deep, deep self-compassion for these parts. And it's been really groundbreaking for me. As I started to discover this part of me that didn't feel like I was enough, one of the other modalities I tried was something called psychodrama, which you might be familiar with. So this is a group form of therapy where you find people in a group to play the role of your parents, and you kind of reenact what happened in your childhood. And then you find other people to play the role of your ideal parents.
Mhm.
And then the idea is to give yourself a more loving alternative to what happened, right? To give yourself the imprint in the body of this other alternative. And so when I learned about this, and I initially learned about it through Bessel's retreat at the Esalen Institute, I became obsessed with the idea that if I just found the ideal father and he could say to me all the things I had longed to hear as a child, then I would
Mhm.
be healed. Right. And I think this is something that happens often in our feeling. We think there's like this magic bullet or this one thing. And of course, there's no such thing.
Right.
But I tried this many, many times. And at one point, I even enlisted this man who looked like Santa Claus to play the role of my ideal father. Turns out the big jolly white man was not my ideal father. But I finally, and this is the final scene of my book, but ultimately, I at one point like orchestrated the perfect psychodrama. I'd handpicked an ideal father, wrote out every line I wanted him to say, did this in combination with a psychedelic journey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like this whole thing perfectly orchestrated. And when the time came, the ideal father said all the lines that I thought I wanted to hear. And I felt nothing.
Hmm.
I felt nothing. And I was like, why isn't this working? This is supposed to be the thing that fixes me. And so I had this picture of myself as a 5-year-old on my desk.
Oh,
And I picked it up
wow.
and I looked in her eyes and I said all the things that I wanted an ideal father to say to me. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that.
Hmm.
You are enough and you are loved. And
That did it?
and I and I and then I felt something. And
Okay, because I felt that too.
yeah, I
When you
felt
just,
it. Yeah, and then I felt it and I finally realized everything I was looking for outside from a relationship, from my work, from an ideal father, it had to come from me. And until I could give myself that love, no one else was going to be able to.
that's right. That's that's so right. My God. Well, wow. And so from there, and you did you continue with the psychodrama
No,
modality? That was
no,
it.
that was it. That was it. I
Was
mean, I continued to do work, just like I think healing is not something that ever stops, like our
Stops.
personal growth. Yeah, it will be a lifelong journey. And I continue to do my IFS work. I continue to do my sessions with Bessel. I do all the things. And what I'll say is what I've noticed is my inner dialogue has started to shift. Right. And
Yeah.
that's like, it's because in therapy, it's often hard to know, am I making progress? And am I getting better? I remember early on in sessions with Bessel, I'd be like, okay, am I going to be healed or what? And when? Like, let's do a quarterly check-in. And,
He's like, there's no timeline.
yeah. And he just be very patient with me in these, and it's not linear. It's not a linear process. But the biggest thing that's changed for me is like, that really mean voice that can come up in our heads, like the really critical, mean
The
voice.
critic.
Yeah. It's not that that voice is like completely gone away, but I notice when it comes up, there's another voice as well. There's another voice that is even stronger than the inner critic, and the one that's telling me, you got this and you are enough, right?
Mhm.
And so that is my mark of progress, that I see that shifting. And when I encounter challenges now, I'm able to process and bounce back much more quickly, right? And again, a big part of it is just having that awareness and then
Yeah.
being able to relate to our parts and ourselves with more compassion.
Yeah. I feel I say it all the time. Awareness is everything. Once you have that awareness, because your subconscious really controls so much of your behavior. But if
Yeah.
you're aware of what
Yeah.
your your trauma, your past, how that affected your future, I feel like that has changed everything for me as well. I mean, it's still an ongoing process, but I'm learning to let go of things that no longer serve me. Um, and
Yeah.
that took a long time for me. I know you sought out trauma therapy. Oh, obviously you sought out Bessel. So he was like obviously the person. But I mean, I did like 20 years of traditional therapy
Mhm.
and nothing happened. And it wasn't until I was basically I was in inpatient care, where worked with did somatic, and then
Mhm.
I started doing then I went once I was out after 30 days, I started doing psychedelic work. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's where I felt that, combined with somatic work, combined with like trauma informed talk,
Yeah.
really transformed my situation, because I had no awareness. I thought like we I didn't think anything was like pausing was important. I felt
Yeah.
like I had to do. And if I
Totally.
didn't do, like I was
Yeah.
wasting time. Little did
100%.
I know.
Yeah. And that's how we numb ourselves, with the doing, right?
Mhm.
Instead of just
Yeah.
sitting with the being. And so you're right. I think awareness is a big part of it. And then all the things you're talking about, psychedelics, the somatic, where it's like living safely in our bodies. And I think that's what psychedelics do. They kind of get us out of our heads, more into our bodies and into deeper levels of consciousness, right? And that's
Yes.
why for me, talk therapy hasn't been effective. But these other practices, a combination of them, I would say,
Right.
mindfulness, the learning how to feel feelings with the support of people who can create a safe space, the internal family systems work, and then the
Yes.
psychedelics. The combination of all of those things has been really what's helped me the most.
Yeah. I would say it was life changing for me.
Yeah.
That was where like I don't recognize who I was, where
Yeah.
I'm just so much
Mm.
more aware, and I'm able to, just
Yeah.
pause.
Yeah.
Um,
And this
so
isn't, again, to listeners, this isn't like, oh, all your life problems are fixed and you're good.
no, it's
I'm
work.
telling you, it's continuous work, and it's like stuff comes up all the time. I'm like highly imperfect, and I still get scared, and I still feel rejected. I still feel not enough at times, but it's just more like the way that you relate to that changes over time. So
Mhm.
that's what I want to say. It's like, don't feel bad if you still have setbacks or challenges. That's all part of it,
Right.
but it's like our resilience though is really dictated by how much self-compassion we have, and that's what I believe now.
That's beautiful. So, what does success look like to you now? Like what is it today?
Yeah. I think before it was really about like so much more about outcomes, to the point that that was what was making me crazy when things didn't turn out the way I expected. I feel like a failure. And certainly my company crashing made me feel like that. So the company was saved. You guys will have to read about it in the book, but
Yeah.
Tony Robbins came in and saved my company, and it was an
Oh,
amazing, very serendipitous story. But that's awesome. We reached 1 million babies as of this year, which is the goal we set almost two
amazing.
decades ago. And that's amazing. And I'm so proud of that. But really, for me, the biggest accomplishment is learning how to embrace myself. And I
Yeah.
didn't know how to do that in the beginning. And so, like, for me now, self-care is the most important thing, because we can only give to others when our own cup is full and when we're in a healthy place. So that's what I prioritize first and foremost. And then living by my values, less about outcomes, but just knowing that I'm living with love, I'm giving to other people, and I continue to grow every day. Those are things I can control, right? I can't control the outcomes. And that's been really helpful for me, even in launching a book, because I'm just wired to be an overachiever. So of course I wanted to do well and all the things. But a couple of weeks ago, a dear friend came out to Honolulu, where I live now, and she did a ceremony with me as we prepared for the book to be in the world. And at that point, I only had one copy of the book, and I threw it in the ocean.
Oh, wow.
And I just let go. And I had written this manifesto for myself that said, let the waves take this message to where it needs to go.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I believe that. I put my soul into writing those. Anyone who reads it, I think you'll feel like my soul is in those pages. And I really hope I wrote it because I wanted to hold a light to others who might be on a similar path. And it's not in my control. So I'm also just letting go. And I've just so much more like wellness when I approach life in that manner.
Well, I mean, just listening to your story, like you said, it crashed, and I think maybe that was it happened for a reason, so you can start exploring your own personal
100%.
success. Yes, and then once everything was once you started your healing journey, it sounds like things just fell into place the way you wanted it and the way it needed to happen.
Absolutely. That's what happened. Just like when I let go, the magic happened. The universe came in and like everything found its rightful place. But I love just thinking about like that moment, which felt like the lowest point in my life. Right. And
Mm,
that's why the book is called Like a Wave We Break. I felt so broken in that moment. And when I look back now, I am so grateful that happened. I'm so grateful that I lost everything, because when you lose everything, you're forced to discover, who am I really beyond all of this?
right.
Right. And I was forced to go on an inner journey and face some painful things and discover who I really am. And I developed that self-love. And none of that would have happened if the company hadn't crashed in that moment. And so that's something I encourage everyone now. Like, how do you think about your biggest breaking points as your biggest breakthroughs?
Yep.
Right.
Love
And what
that.
are you getting to learn through this challenge that you otherwise wouldn't be able to learn? So I'm very grateful for the way things have happened. And I think, the more we kind of surrender outcomes and let go, the happier we are.
Yeah. Wow. Jane, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, well, just in I feel so deeply about the message in my book. And so just encourage listeners to pick up a copy of Like a Wave We Break. And that's just my deepest hope that my message can help others to feel less alone and to really guide them on their healing journeys. So they don't have to go through everything I went through, and they can learn from what I did.
Well, what a beautiful story, and I just love how it just came for full circle for you. And it's so beautiful, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your truth so courageously. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. That was Jane Chen, author of Like a Wave We Break, a memoir of falling apart and finding myself. For those listening, Jane's memoir, Like a Wave We Break, is available on Amazon, and we'll link it in the show notes. You can also watch this episode on YouTube. And don't forget, you can visit traumasurvivorthriver.com to listen to past episodes and also access the latest issue of Authentic Insider magazine, where you will find powerful stories from survivors and thrivers. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm Lorilee Binstock. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Take care.